Palestinians continue being killed by Israeli security forces as tensions rise in the occupied Palestinian territories. This follows US President Donald Trump's decision to recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital and relocate the US embassy in Israel from Tel Aviv to the occupied city. The Palestinian campaign is pressing for rights to land which Palestinians lost to Israel in the 1948 war of its foundation, and for an end to the Israeli-Egyptian blockade of Gaza. More than 500,000 Israelis live in over 120 settlements built since Israel's occupation of the Palestinian territories of the West Bank in 1967. Much of the international community considers the settler units illegal according to the Geneva Conventions, which forbid construction on occupied lands. Despite this, Israeli officials have approved plans for the construction of more than 100 new settler units in the central part of the occupied West Bank, defying the international outcry against the Tel Aviv regime's land expropriation and settlement expansion policies. And with the occupation comes the violence. Recently, Israeli security forces killed Palestinians and wounded many others who had taken part in weekly protests in the Gaza Strip. Some 20,000 Gazans have participated in these protests, a few hundred meters from what Israel considers its territory. These demonstrations also reflect the anger at the blocking off of crossings delivering humanitarian supplies and other goods into Gaza. Why have so many Palestinians been killed by Israeli forces? And how does the public in Britain feel about the continued occupation of Palestinian territories by Israeli settlers? Simple questions with important answers. Does the public here in Britain know that peaceful Palestinian protesters are being killed by Israeli forces? We asked them. Here's what they told us.
Britain and the world should do something about it, and do something now. Not tomorrow, now.
In this world, we all really should try to spread peace and love, so I just think it's really sad, to be honest.
I don't understand why it's still going on. I just think it seems obvious that it's unfair and they're murdering people.
I was aware some had died. I wasn't aware there were lots, but obviously it's not good.
I am aware, and I do think actually it's a tragedy. I don't know quite what the resolution is, but I do think that something needs to be done, and I think the international community has to get involved.
It's the only way that it can stop people from changing their minds on an international level.
What do I think about it? I don't think it's good for anybody to kill anybody.
My heart goes out to both sides, because I think most ordinary good people want to have peaceful lives, bring up their families and live in peace.
Well, I don't actually know about that, so...
Both parties need to find a common denominator and work out something, and there's madmen on both sides, you know.
If I didn't know, I would have been living in Mars for the last 5 months. The right of return is a right for the Palestinians as enshrined in the United Nations Resolution 194. And of course, Israel will never respect or adhere to any United Nations resolutions. And killing Palestinians, especially children, because the children are the future, is part and parcel of the Zionist policy of the ethnic cleansing of Palestine. It has been going on for the last 100 years, long before Israel was established in 1948. The Zionist terrorist organizations like the Haganah and Orgon and Tzfai, Levi, were killing Palestinians en masse, massacre after massacre after massacre.
I saw the protesters firsthand. I actually was involved in some of the protests, and in particular one of the protests that we were in, very peaceful. I mean, it couldn't have gotten as peaceful as that was. And we were on the border by the wall, on one of the side, not sure which side of the wall we were on. We were on the Palestinian side of the wall, but I'm not sure which section of it we were. and we were protesting very peacefully, and the riot police came out. They started pushing us, and it ended up being tear gas. They ended up throwing tear gas at us, and a lot of the people that were there were just women, younger kids, some old people, and there's no way they could have caused harm. So it was as peaceful as possible, yet we got bombed with tear gas, and people were laid out, and it was a crazy situation. There was no need for it.
Amongst those killed by the Israeli forces were journalists, medics and children. How do the public feel about this?
Absolutely. I would say, it should be a murder charge on them, and if not, anything serious than that.
No, absolutely not. Like, we're all human, we're all trying to live, and I think that the conflict that's occurring is just like, it's long gone, you know? Like, there's no excuse for it anymore, so...
The Americans have a lot of support for Israel, don't they? So I just think that it's a really complex issue, and a lot of it is just about kind of power play, and people are afraid of kind of stepping on toes, and I just think that it's completely barbaric.
That's definitely not something that should happen, and more people should, because I was not aware of it. I'm not aware of it, so more people should be aware of it.
Something has to be done between Israel and Palestine that resolves it, you know, as a long-term commitment, in the way probably that Ireland has had to be resolved as a long-term.
The system that we have in Israel is a sort of a lack of spirituality and just to care for yourself, and the humans, they're not evil in themselves, but they're part of that system, and it makes them do these barbaric actions.
It disturbs me that anybody would set out and kill anybody. And I'd need to know more about the situation to see the intention of why they were killed.
I don't think there was necessarily a target of that. I think that there's, again, it's a very complex situation, and there's right on both sides and there's misconceptions on both sides.
Needless to say, I'm totally against that kind of behavior. There's no need for that. It's not acceptable.
That was out of order. They should have been attacking the protesters armed with stones, weapons, etc. If they were attacking children and journalists, then that was out of order.
Nobody is safe from Israel. Anything that is Palestinian is a threat to Israel, and as such, it should be destroyed. They uproot our olive trees. They desecrate our holy places. They steal our land and natural resources, and they hijacked our culture and our food. Our children, as I said, are the future of Palestine and the future of the Palestinian struggle and the Palestinian state, if it ever comes to being. So nobody is immune. A journalist, a child, a pregnant woman, or an old man are targets, legitimate targets, as have been articulated by many a Zionist leader.
Medics are there to heal. Children are children. They're innocent. And, you know, journalists are there to report. So what harm could they cause? You know, so I think only people that would do that to them is savages. It's the only way to explain it. And, you know, any life lost is, you know, any life taken in that degree is not right. You know, killing anybody is not right. So, but to do it to them is just pure savagery. You know, fight those who fight you. But, you know, Malcolm X said it best. He said, if you're not careful, the media will turn the oppressed into the oppressor. You see what I'm saying? So it's funny because one side of the media goes and turns some of the other media into the opposite thing. It's such a crazy situation, and there's so many layers to it, and it boils down to seeing the innocent die, and that's the messed up part about the whole thing, and the thing that brings tears to your eyes every time, if you're not a savage.
Israel has killed over 150 largely peaceful Palestinians and wounded thousands more since March. Israel claims that these killings were justified as defense, but the death toll on the Israeli side is still zero. Does the public here in Britain feel like this is a justified or even a balanced conflict? and why.
They are powerful nation and doing a wrong thing.
There's no excuse anymore. They just kind of want to keep prolonging something. I might actually really have a strong opinion about war, and I think it's so ridiculous.
It's nonsense, isn't it? I mean, you know, the numbers speak for themselves, don't they? So there's not an argument, really.
No, it doesn't sound like that, if those figures are correct, yeah.
You just don't know genuinely what's gone on behind the scenes, which is why you need to rely on the political forces going in, why you need diplomacy working properly, and somebody who really is a commentator on the ground understanding it.
For me, it's not about fair or unfair. It's just unjust or just, you know. And it's obviously unjust. No one likes people to be killed, especially when there's little reason for it.
I don't personally accept anybody killing anybody, so it upsets me a lot.
I think it would be wrong to say everybody has the same thoughts within Israel, and there's a lot right in Israel, there's a lot wrong in Israel.
I think that's stretching that idea and that it's, again, inappropriate. Back in the day, I remember when there were student demonstrations and the police came in and harmed the students, and again, that's never appropriate.
As I say, on both sides need to sit down and find a way forward to work something out, because it's silly the way things are going. Human beings can do better than this.
Israel, always the aggressor, yet always plays the victims. And the West, and in particular United States of America, are happy to back them, and they say it's self-defense. It is never self-defense. It is aggression. It is brutal force, premeditated and executed as per the orders of their superiors. Mr. Lieberman said, who is the defense minister of Israel, we target what we want, we aim at what we want, and we hit what we want. This is premeditated murder. And those civilians going to the fence with nothing but flags are not armed, are not dangerous to the soldiers who are heavily armed and fortified on the border. This is plain murder. And the United States of America is complicit in this crime.
Well, again, if you go to the Israeli side, they won't say the death toll is zero. They'll inflate their death toll to who knows where, you know, and they'll flip everything and make themselves look like the victim. But seeing it firsthand, it's not that at all. And you go, you know, I don't understand how you can continuously kill people who have nothing to even defend themselves with. You know, you'll get locked up for a knife, I believe, that's longer than like your finger or something. You get like 5 years for it. And this is insanity to me, while the settlers are able to have weapons, and the Palestinians who are right next to the settlers can't even have that knife. So you tell me the imbalance there.
20,000 Gazans participated in these recent protests, which took place a few hundred meters from the Israeli fence. Medics said Israeli gunfire killed 2 men and wounded at least 270 other Palestinians, 50 of them with live bullets. The number of Palestinian deaths killed by Israeli forces since the weekly protests began at the end of March 2018 has risen to 170. How does the public feel about the fact that over 500,000 Israelis now live in over 120 settlements built since Israel's occupation of the Palestinian territories of the West Bank in 1967?
From day one, Palestinian land, and they nick that land, and a murder is one thing, thieving is another thing. They're doing everything unlawful.
I think there's a lot of lack of education as well, and people just think that they can jump in and make their own rules, and
it sounds like it's illegal, right? So I just, again, I just don't think it makes any sense, and it just seems completely unfair, and you know, they just need more support, really.
if the conventions set the laws that they shouldn't be building there, they shouldn't.
I have a really big problem with that. You can't have a Geneva Convention and then decide that you're going to behave in a way that suits your own agenda. And I come back to, it needs the international community going in there.
You see that everywhere. I mean, you've got to look at things like the US and Mexico as a good example, but this is like, it's not so, obviously it's right in your eyes when you see the settlement with the swimming pool and the huge water tanks right next to people who have no water at all.
I'm also getting worried about how the Palestinians are being moved from where they have lived for centuries. So I can only say that it causes a disturbance in me, the whole situation.
I just think the sooner that everybody has a roof over their head and are living in peace, the world would be a better place.
I know that I'm supposed to be pro-Zionist given my background, but in fact, I just don't think it's right. I think people are people and we should have equal rights, and I know it's very unlikely that they're going to come up with a solution to share, but that would be where I would be headed.
I don't think it contributes to the peace at all. I think it ought to be, there should be some constraint brought about that, and I think there needs to be a way to find some kind of compromise in the situation.
This is a result of the discredited Oslo Accords. The Oslo Accords, which was signed by the PLO without consultation of the Palestinian people, may I add, in 1993, had in the agreement 7 items. I shall mention just the three most important of these items. First, they said this is an interim agreement, and after 5 years, we will address the final status issues. Those 3 are Jerusalem, the refugees, and the settlements. None of them has been addressed, and as recently as last January, Mr. Trump legitimized the theft of Jerusalem and dismissed UNRWA, which is the United Nations Work Refugees Agency, and reduced their allocations, and he will do whatever the Israelis ask of him.
In my opinion, from my times that I've been there several times, and I've said this before, the settlers, the settlements are the spinal cord of this problem right now. There's many other factors, but right now, the spinal cord is these settlers, because there's agreements, there's treaties, and they're still just pushing. They're pushing. They have their paved roads, they have their beautiful settlements, and they're destroying these villages that are under them. They're destroying these Palestinian homes that are near them or next to them. For example, Hebron. You go to Hebron, and it's like the end of the world. They had this one kid, I remember when we were there, and the settlers broke into somebody's house, and they beat the pregnant wife, and they took rocks and they smashed one of their son's teeth in, and they poisoned their olive trees. So, and they throw urine, they throw feces on the shopkeepers. They have to close early. It's just. And then there's propaganda. There's billboards all around Hebron talking about just lies and history of how, the Jews were oppressed there and they were there. It's just crazy. You have to see it for yourself. It makes no sense, and it's the nucleus of the problem right now, and it's not helping at all. Being also that these settlers are from California and Brooklyn, so I don't get it. I don't get it at all. It's so disturbing.
What, if anything, can be done to stop Israel's constant assault on Palestinian human rights?
I think Britain should be doing a part in it and saying to, sending a message to the world, telling them, listen, whatever they are doing is wrong and we should be backing them.
I wish you could just go in there and be like, guys, let's just live a simple life, but what can you do? We can try to educate as much as we can, but if people don't want to listen, they won't. So I don't know how long it's going to go on for.
Just feels more divisive, really. I think, but yeah, talking about it obviously helps, educating people so they can see both sides of the argument. But yeah, I don't know, it just seems desperately unfair.
Within Israel, there are different voices. So right now, the more right-wing people are in power. So if Western countries don't blindly support the more right-wing parts of Israel's society and support the more liberal part of the Israel society, probably that will be a better way to go.
As an international community going in, you know, the elders community I really rated. I think all of those senior statespeople who are going into different areas of society and looking and trying to help, I think they're really, really powerful.
A visit is always worth doing, so you can see it, you can lend your hand. When I was in Jerusalem, I spoke to the people in the mosque there. They were saying we feel abandoned because no one comes to visit us anymore. So, you know, it's difficult, but a visit is good. Speaking out about it is also good.
I think we need to put more focus and hear more about the peaceful movement within both arenas, and allow the human rights to come from that. And those peaceful Israelis and peaceful Palestinians will come up with an answer, because they're the people affected by it.
We all have to, and we're all increasingly living on a planet that's getting smaller and smaller, and we've all got to respect one another and love one another and live together and have a good life. I mean, personally, I think everybody should dance. If everybody danced, the world would be a much better place.
Well, it's a good question, and I'm not sure that it's within our power, because I grew up in the 60s, and I know we had our ideals and we thought things were getting better, and right now things are way worse. So, but you just keep on protesting peacefully.
Both sides need to give something in the situation, and I think there needs to be some kind of way. Israel needs to be there, but the Palestinians need to have some land as well. So it's a difficult one. It's a very difficult one.
Well, the United Nations have to have its teeth. I just mentioned Mr. Trump. He took the United States of America out of 3 United Nations organizations: UNESCO, the Human Rights Council, and UNRWA. And that is because he and his team think that the United Nations is biased towards Israel. The international community, by looking the other way and keeping silent, are complicit in these crimes. And the sooner they find their moral fiber and backbone, the better. Otherwise, Israel will play havoc, will continue to play havoc, not only in Palestine, but in the Middle East and the world at large.
The world needs to come together. You know, it's not enough for one country here, one country there. You know, it's not enough for Iran to bring awareness. It's not enough for Lebanon to bring awareness or to help. It needs to be a collective effort. In fact, if just the Arab world and the Muslim world gets together, it could make a huge difference. It can't just be one country here, one country there, a few organizations here, a few organizations there. It has to be a collective effort. For instance, apartheid, it became a world issue. And I'm not saying that Palestine isn't a world issue, but the height of awareness that apartheid brought in South Africa was massive, and it forced the hand of the oppressors. So there's more at stake here as far as money goes, maybe I'm wrong, but there's a lot of, you know, oil and things involved in the Middle East that, you know, might play a big hand in there, geographically also. So aside from the geopolitics, I'm not comparing it to South Africa. South Africa was bananas. And I'm just saying that the world needs to come together for this to happen. Awareness and unity, that's the only way.
Less than a month before US President Donald Trump took office, the United Nations Security Council adopted Resolution 2334, calling on Israel to immediately and completely cease all settlement activities in the occupied Palestinian territories, including East Jerusalem. The resolution has been ignored. So the building of Israeli homes on occupied Palestinian territory continues. And despite all international objections, Israel keeps using force to oppress the Palestinian population and even cuts off humanitarian aid. This strategy is working for now, but for how much longer? History tells us if you keep taking things away from an oppressed population, sooner or later they'll have nothing left to lose. What happens then is anyone's guess, but it is unlikely to be good for the Palestinians or for Israel.